If your mother, your sister, your wife, your female friend, or any other female that you care about in your life was denied life-changing or life-saving health care, how would that make you feel? Now, how is abortion any different? For many women, even if they're not going to be ill from the pregnancy, it is a life-saving procedure because they cannot support these babies, or nor sometimes do they want them, or are they emotionally ready for them. So in my opinion, that's no different than denying someone health care for being ill. The government, which is composed mostly of men, in my opinion, should have no part governing what is going to be one of the most intimate and emotional decisions that a woman, and in some cases her partner, might ever have to make in their life. And I just don't believe that the government is qualified to make that kind of decision for everyone. Every situation is different. There are some women who might die if they don't have access to an abortion, which has happened in other countries. And I don't think that should be okay, especially when you think of America is supposed to be so progressive. There are people here who want to take those rights away from women, especially people who've never been a woman, which brings me to my next point, that government officials in general, but especially the males, should have no say in abortion laws or birth control laws or anything of the sort, simply because of the fact that they have never been a woman. They don't understand what it's like to have these problems, what it would be like to have a pregnancy that's unwanted. Most of the government is male. In our Congress alone, we have 445 men and 93 women, which is grossly unbalanced in my opinion. And even if every woman voted for what was right for women, they would be beaten every time, which is dangerous actually for our rights as humans, which I believe abortion is a human right. Just because they have a strong political background, it doesn't mean that they are qualified to make this decision for us. They have their business experience or their political experience in no way makes them qualified to make these decisions for women everywhere, when every situation is different. You can't make a blanket policy for everyone and just expect it to be okay. Luckily, the Roe v. Wade case is still intact for now, but there are people around who want to overturn that, and that's very dangerous when you think of many situations where an abortion might be the best or the only option for some women. Also, in my opinion, and the opinion of many doctors, a fetus is not a human life at conception. Just because a bunch of cells come together or a heart might be beating doesn't mean it's a human life. And my reasoning for this is because the fetus is not viable outside of the woman's body. If you could take the fetus out and it could still be alive and develop, then that would be great. The woman wouldn't have to kill the baby. But unfortunately, that's not true. So if it's just like, at that point, it's just, for lack of a better word, some kind of parasite or tumor, and it's not a real life yet. A real life is viable on its own. And it is still the woman's body until the time that the fetus is viable. You can't say, oh, it's no longer your body. You still have bodily autonomy over yourself, and you have the right to make your own decisions based on what you think is right for you. And you shouldn't have to take another life into account when, in reality, it's just a bunch of cells. This is a quote that I got off scienceblogs.com, and it's a doctor saying, "I've spoken to these eggs many times, and they make it quite clear that they are not a human being." Well, that might seem like a funny quote, or a simple quote, or maybe stretching it a little bit. That quote's by Dr. Lewis Wolpert. It makes sense because his point, as simple as it may be, is showing us that that these pile of cells, they're not ready to be on their own, and I think that you should have the right to terminate something that is still in the early stages. Late-term abortion is another story, but these early abortions, I don't believe that you're not a murderer, you're not a horrible person for doing this. And the other side actually tries to guilt trip these women, which I think could not be more wrong. And especially certain political figures that we've recently heard, wanting to require women to have funerals for the fetuses that they abort, which is, in my opinion, just cruel and unusual punishment, and that is definitely violating your human rights, because in reality, you don't have to have a funeral for anyone who dies. Even if your 7-year-old child does, you're not required to have a funeral. Yes, you have to dispose of the body properly, but you are not required to have a funeral service. So that is just, I think, petty and disgusting, in my opinion, and anyone who agrees with that, even if you're pro-life, that is disgusting to me. Another interesting point is that I read something recently that said people who are pro-life are not pro-life. They're simply pro-birth. Because when you think of the people who claim to be pro-life, those are the same people that complain about their tax dollars going to support, single mothers or going to support poor families. And so they are simply pro-birth because they have no interest in the life of the child after she has it. You want to ensure that all these babies are born, but then what are you going to do to help afterwards? Many women have abortions because they can't afford to support these children, but you want to force them to have those children, and then do what to help them? You think that their economic situation will change all of a sudden? Because I certainly don't. 21% of children already live in poverty, which is too high, but the more of these births that you try to force, the higher and higher that number will rise. And everyone says, oh, adoption is always an option. Of course it is. Some people find that to be a viable option for me. I know for me personally, I could never do that, and that has its own emotional tax on the people who do that. Not that it's a bad thing, but that's a really emotional thing that you're asking someone to go through when an abortion is just clearly a better option for them. So to recap my points, the fact that the government is mostly men means that they will never be qualified to make these decisions until there is a time where both genders can be equally represented. A fetus, in my opinion, is not a person until you can remove it from the womb and it can survive, live, and breathe on its own. And a lot of people who are pro-life, they don't care about the life of the child after birth. So, in my opinion, you're simply pro-birth. You just want these babies to be born, and you don't want anything to do with them after that. And here's a quote by Joycelyn Elders. "We really need to get over this love affair with the fetus and start worrying about the children." And I got that from civilliberty.about.com. And that is really the bottom line with this speech. Start worrying about the children that we have in poverty now instead of trying to create more and protect these fetuses who they're not even children yet. We need to figure out about the children who are already here, the children who are wanted, and stop trying to force women to have children that are unwanted or that they can't support. Thank you for listening.